Alright, in this video I'm going to show you how to soften the shoulders of a tensile dog bone in our 4140 steel lab. So this softening procedure is not used on every single sample. In the handout it says if the hardness value is over 30 and the Rockwell hardness C, but I'm going to amend that to if the hardness is above 40. So that's the only time we're going to use this. All other times when you measure the hardness and it's less than 40, you don't have to do anything, you don't have to do this procedure. This is only for a select group of samples in which they are quite hard. So if you're asking yourself, why do we do this? It's because most of the grips to hold the tensile dog bones in the Instron have a certain hardness value, and if the sample is approaching that hardness value, we can actually ruin the grips. And so we need to soften the shoulders. However, we don't want to affect the temper or the heat treatment in our reduced section, right? This test sample. So we only want to soften the shoulders so we can grab onto the sample. And so that's what we're going to show you in this video. So we need the sample in question. It's already been tested for hardness. This is just a dummy sample. We need a blowtorch. I have a MAP gas blowtorch with a safety switch. And then we need a setup to cool. So here I'm at the back sink in the materials lab, and I have the sink, and I have this copper tube connected to it. And then in the bottom here, it's a little hard to see, but I have a stainless steel beaker, and it's set up so that I can run water over a majority of the sample. For example, from the bottom up to the shoulder here. And the idea is I'm going to have running cold water on that portion of the sample so that it doesn't get heat treated while I aim the blowtorch at the shoulder, the top shoulder. So that gets heated, and therefore we can soften it while the rest maintains its temper or its heat treatment. And so that's what I'm going to show you in this video. So if you're doing this, you need some type of torch, your sample, and then this rig, which I'll show in more depth here in a second, that will cool the sample while we heat treat the shoulder. So I'll pause the video and get set up so I can show you this process in more detail. Alright, so I've repositioned so that you can see the setup a little bit better. And so you'll notice I'm inside the sink. This is my stainless steel beaker. It's on top of a little block just so that it's at the right position. And then this tube is connected to the faucet, and it's the right size so that when I put my sample in, you can see that everything is going to be covered, and I'll show you that when we get started. So the first thing I'll want to do is turn on the cold water so that that's flowing. And so, again, note that the water is completely covering the reduced section, the important part that's going to be tested in the tensile tester. And I'm going to just keep this water going so that there's a steady flow of cold water to cool down any sort of treatment that happens, right? So this is going to heat up, and I don't want that to travel down to the sample. So this is going to be continuously running. All right. So at that point, I'm ready to go to the next step. And so I've got my blowtorch here. It needs to be in the on position. That's basically a locking mechanism so it doesn't accidentally click on. And then I'm going to hold it down, and that looks like the blowtorch. And so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to move it along the shoulder. I'm going to try to move it along the shoulder so that it uniformly heats up. And so I'll hold it there for 10 to 20 seconds and then let it slowly cool down in order to soften the steel. So in essence, we're doing heat treatment on the shoulder portion. So what I'll do is I'll do that. I'll heat this up for 10 to 20 seconds. This is kind of a trial and error process. And then let it cool down naturally. So I'll just leave it in air. And then when it's cool, I will do it as many times as I need to get the hardness value down. So I'll have to periodically check this. And then when I'm done with this side, I can flip it around and do the other side as well. All right. So I'll go ahead and run the video while I'm softening this side, and I'll try to make it so you can see it as much as possible. And then note, I'll show you, kind of note what's happening to it while we heat it. And then after it's cooled, I'll show you a closer up image of the sample itself. Alright, so this is going to be my first round, and you might have noticed the color difference. I'm not going to touch it right now because it's going to be very hot, but I'm going to let it naturally cool down, because if you get it too hot and then quench it again, it could re-harden. The other thing to note is the line. You might notice some oxidation, some coloration on it during the heat treatment, and so you want to make sure that that line doesn't creep down below the shoulder, and you can actually see it's comfortably up, and so that means that the temperature of the bar hasn't reached an unsafe point, the rest of the bar that's being cooled here. Alright, so I'll let it cool for a couple minutes, and then I'll give you a close-up to show you what it looks like. Alright, so I've let it cool down, and just to be safe, after a couple minutes I hit it with some cold water so that this was safe to touch. You could also use either a contact thermocouple or infrared just to verify the temperature is safe to touch. But I've gotten, so this is after the first treatment, and again you'll notice this coloration that we have here. So as long as this coloration doesn't go below the shoulder, you should be fine. But what you're going to want to do is, after a treatment or two, you're going to want to test the hardness up here again, and if it's above 40, you'll want to do the treatment again, just like we did. But if it's below 40, you can move on. So you'll want to move to the other shoulder that you see. So you'll want to do this one. And so it'd be the same process. And another thing you can do is, if you notice that this treatment's only taking effect on one side, you might flip it over. But typically it heats through pretty well on both sides. So you probably only have to do one section. So it really will depend on your sample, how many of these treatments that it takes. And again, I didn't really time this, but you can also adjust the treatment time, how long you have the blowtorch on the shoulder, in order to soften it faster, etc. So you'll keep doing that procedure until you've got it below 40 on the Rockwell Hardness C scale, and then move on to the other side and complete that in the same way, and then do any other samples that you need to do. So that's the procedure for softening the shoulder of these 4140 steel bars, stencil samples.